In the most exciting news for Australian trotting breeding in a very long time, there is a new stallion standing at Alabar Farms in 2024, a new trotting stallion. Last year's United States Trotting Horse of the Year Tactical Approach is shuttling down to stand his debut season. It's great to be joined by his trainer, Nancy Takter. I just wanted to start off by saying how exciting it is for Australian breeders to have access to this horse. It must be exciting for you. You've now had quite a few stallions shuttle down, but there was something pretty special about this guy.
Yeah, he was really the first great trotter that I actually developed. I've had some good trotters before, but nobody that I actually picked out at the yearling sales and then, broke and then trained down as a two and back again as a 3-year-old. So definitely a very special guy.
I mean, it's not an easy question to answer, but what made him so good, or what things combined made him such a great trotter?
He was a very good gaited horse. He had a very big stride. I think you could see that on some of the photos that they've used for his marketing. That his stride was just unreal. He just covered an immense amount of ground, but also an extremely smart horse. Took very good care of himself. He never missed a meal. Always very relaxed. Never nervous about anything. And then on top of that, he just had a great set of lungs and the desire to win.
Do you remember him at the Yearling sales? You mentioned that you picked him out and you broke him yourself, and there's a lot of horses. So, what stood out at that point to make you consider him? Was he the first season of tactical landings as well?
Um, he is from the first crop of tactical landings, and I kind of wanted to go to the sale and purchase, at least one tactical landing because obviously my dad trained tactical landing and my parents own a piece of him. So try to support the family stallions as much as I can. When I actually first saw Tactical Approach at Hunterton Farm. I went out to the farm to inspect their yearlings, and I think I turned out 5 horses that day in the field and watched them run around, and he was one of the 5 that I did turn out. I was very familiar with his pedigree. My dad had trained Sarcy and his second dam, Southwind Alaire, and actually even his third dam, Articulate Hanover, who my dad actually had when I was a little kid. So very familiar with the family. It's a very good pedigree. He was a beautiful yearling, nice and big, maybe a little bit immature body wise, just because he just hadn't grown into himself. But he had some special charisma to him, and I just fell in love with him when they turned him out for me. I actually have a video on my phone that I actually sent to John Federa, who was one of the partners on him when he was racing. And I was like, this is the guy that we need to buy. So it was definitely love at first sight.
There was a video circulating last week on social media of, I think, his one of his first days being broken in, and he was such a big boy, but he looked to be smart and had a good head on his shoulders even way back then.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we break our yearlings. It's a very quick process over here. I have usually anywhere between 30 and 45 yearlings that need to be broken. I would say from the first time they get a harness and a bridle on, they're pretty much jogging on their own like 5 or 6 days later. So he was very smart, very easy to deal with. I think he actually only had 2 lines. We usually have like 2 extra people that go on the cart when we break them. He maybe had, maybe 1 or 2 days with 2 extra lines, and then he was fine by himself. So very manageable and easy horse to definitely deal with.
Due to his size, he didn't have a big 2-year-old season, but you could tell there was something there, and you clearly knew that because you really looked after him as a young horse.
Yeah, he was really good trading down, and but like you said, he just kind of big and a little bit growth spurty. But at the same time, I think he won his first lifetime start by open lengths, 8 or 9 lengths. So he showed the ability. He trotted a couple fast miles at 2, but at that point the season was kind of winding down over here. So the decision was made to turn him out and just let him grow into himself, which was the right decision for the horse at that time.
Any 3-year-old trotter that shows above average ability is considered a Hamiltonian type. And we know, as history will say, he eventually went on to win that race. But did a lot of his 3-year-old early seasonal, I guess, training really focus around that one race?
I would say not really, actually, because he was a little bit inexperienced as a 2-year-old. He actually started racing quite early, for his 3-year-old season, much earlier than what I usually start my 3-year-old. So, he had a couple qualifiers and he was kind of racing in non-winners races. But I think even his first qualifier as a 3-year-old, Joseph Fonseca drove him, who's one of my assistant trainers, and we were all really impressed with how he went, covering good ground, and he had a good fast last quarter. And he raced well in the non-winners races. Scott Ziarn eventually started driving him, and Scott always really liked him, but we protected him a little bit and raced him off the pace a lot just to kind of teach him how to race because he did miss his rookie year pretty much. And then, once he, the bigger races started, he started showing ability, and he was always trotting the fastest last quarters and the fastest last halves in all the races. So I knew there was a little bit of a shot that, he could really develop into something really special.
So let's skip forward. He gets through the eliminations, he qualifies for the Hamiltonian, and then he comes up with a terrible post position out wide. Did you still have a feeling that he could win the race? Because, of course, it was your first Hamiltonian, but you've seen what it takes to win one with your father being so successful. So, talk us through, I guess, leading into the race and then take us through the race itself.
Well, obviously, drawing the 10 hole, you're like, oh no. I actually remember it. I was sitting on an airplane leaving Lexington, heading back to New Jersey, and I was watching the draw, and we were taxiing towards the takeoff. And I was like, oh no, I hope we can finish to see the draw before we take off. And then afterwards, I was like, oh man, I wish I hadn't seen the draw because I was thinking about the entire flight. But the same time with those big races, especially in the United States, everybody's very aggressive the first half of the race, kind of jockeying for position, especially in the first turn. So, I, I obviously it's in an ideal spot to have the 10 hole. You either take back or you have to leave really, really hard. And I think that Scott made the right decision, being that the horse had always finished his miles so strong, and thinking that it was probably going to be a little bit of an overpaced race. Um, but he had a good week leading into the Hamiltonian. It was a very warm week, but like I said, he takes good care of himself and always eats everything and drinks all his water, and does everything right. So I felt good going into race day. I jokingly had told one of my friends, Michelle Crawford, who I was meeting in Saratoga later that night for dinner, that I was just going to go in the Hamiltonian and then I was going to meet Michelle for dinner. And then it actually worked out. So I think I had a good feeling all day that kind of things were going to go in the right direction because I was pretty, like I said, I was pretty confident in the horse.
So he takes back at the start. There's a lot of speed, but he's still a long, long way off them at the top of the stretch. That must have been a pretty amazing feeling. It's like the seas parted and it was meant to be. And he just rocketed home. There's some great footage of you watching the race, and it must have been an incredibly special feeling once he crossed that line first.
Yeah, it's kind of like you watch it and you're like in disbelief. You're like, wait, is this actually happening for real? Like, is my horse actually going to get up and win this race? Because I've been second. Two of the years before, I was second twice with Ready for Money and Spy Boots. So, um, just to it felt like it was actually really in slow motion, like the whole stretch, because I see everybody keeps pulling off the rail, and I'm like, geez, he's got a lot of trot. He's coming up the inside here. And him being such an honest horse, I knew that he was going to give a good effort all the way through the wire. And, he got up, and obviously one of the biggest thrills of my career.
Then he went to Kentucky to contest several of the races at the Red Mile in Lexington, capped off by his Kentucky Futurity success. Where does that race sort of stack up as well? Because I think we all know the Hamiltonian, but this is a pretty big deal in its own right.
Yeah, the Kentucky Futurity is, probably the oldest stakes race in the United States, and it's one of our Triple Crown races. Very prestigious race to win. I actually think the Kentucky Futurity was probably his better race of the two. He was in an impossible spot in the Futurity, and he made up a ton of ground that normal horses don't make up. And usually the last quarters at the Red Mile are very fast, and it's kind of hard to make up ground, especially on the inside of the rail like he did. So He wasn't in the best spot in the race, and for him to overcome it just showed what a champion he was.
You've had some great horses. You've had several horses of the year as well, but he really deserved that title. And in terms of your career, to have a Trotter of the Year, that must be extremely special.
Yeah, obviously for sure being a tactor, I was always kind of thought that I was always gonna kind of lean towards trotters. And then early in my career, I had so much success with pacers that I think people kind of forgot that I came from a trotting family. And I always heard that, oh, she can't train trotters. So I was actually really happy that I proved that I can actually do that now. So I proved it to myself. It took me, because I had so much early success with pacers, JK, She's a Lady, Captain Crunch, Tall Dark Stranger, and those types of horses. I kind of think maybe I lost a little confidence in myself that I could actually train trotters too. And my dad always told me, he's like, you're still young, you need a little age to train trotters. So I guess I just needed to grow up and kind of have a few more years under my belt and train some trotters. But you know what? When you train trotters, like tactical approach, they're very easy. It's not a lot of gating work. He wore full four steel shoes, nothing very special or complicated with him. So you just kind of have to condition them and point and go.
With these great 3-year-olds, there's always the likelihood that they're going to retire after 3. But I know that you would have loved to continue to train him on. That wasn't to be the case, but you're of the opinion that he was only going to get better and better.
Oh, absolutely. I would have loved to see him race as an age horse. I think he would have stamped himself as one of the greatest in the sport if he had continued racing. And I was very not happy with it. And I was a little vocal about his retirement because, I didn't think it was the right move for him. Because I think that the sport should have seen what he could have really done. I think he would have been a great horse to take to Europe and race in the elite lop, or even they have a newer distance race in Sweden this year that I think he would have done very well in. And then even to maybe take him to a Prix de Marique or something like that, because I really do think that he would have been the perfect horse to kind of do those things that great horses like Moneymaker did, because like I said, he's so easy on himself and, and so talented and always, gave a good effort, never any issues with him really. And I think he would have developed into something very, very special.
So for Australian breeders then that maybe have queries over American stallions and the fact that they only race at a mile, you had no reservations that further wouldn't have necessarily even maybe been better for him.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I mean, if you go back and watch his replays, his strongest and fastest parts were always crossing the finish line. So I think that proves to that he had a lot left in the tank, and an extra quarter of a mile or even a half a mile wouldn't have made a difference for him. And I train my horses a lot on the sand track, which is like a straight sand track, and the older horses had trouble keeping up with him. Older pacers couldn't keep up with him on the straight track. So his strength and stamina definitely would have zero concern racing him in over a mile.
Well, there's been so much excitement in the Southern Hemisphere about his arrival, and it's a massive deal to have him standing in the flesh as well at Alabar Farms in 2024. Before I let you go, now, for those who don't follow me on social media, you may have seen that Nancy and I purchased a couple of yearling colts together at the sales in the last few weeks, both by Alabar side stallions, a Majestic Sun and an Elite Stride. And Nancy, I know you really like the Elite Stride fellow, so pressure's on now, but maybe if they're going to step up, we can see you visit over the next couple of seasons. Who knows, you might even duck out and see Captain Crunch and Tactical Approach at Alabar.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I would love to come and visit. I've actually never been to Australia, so definitely on my bucket list. And I'm for sure going to come visit you, Brittany, so you can give me the grand tour of everything that there is to see there.